I remember the cold concrete floor of the shelter like it was yesterday. My paws barely made a sound as I padded around the small cage, watching other dogs get chosen one by one. Big dogs with loud barks. Fluffy dogs with wagging tails. Everyone wanted someone strong, someone impressive. Not me. I was the smallest Lhasa puppy they'd ever seen, with fur that stuck up funny and ears too big for my head. Day after day, families walked past my cage without stopping. I'd press my nose against the bars, hoping someone would notice me. But they never did. Until that rainy Tuesday when a little girl with braided hair stopped right in front of my cage. Her eyes met mine, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something I'd almost forgotten, hope. She whispered through the bars, "You're perfect." I didn't know it then, but she would become my whole world. Ella. That was her name. She knelt in the rain outside the shelter, begging her parents to take me home. I watched through the window as her mother crossed her arms and her father checked his watch impatiently. "He's too small," her mother said, pointing at me through the glass. "What's the point of a dog that can't even protect the house?" Ella's father nodded. "We need a Real Guard dog, not a decoration." But Ella wouldn't give up. She cried and pleaded, promising she'd do extra chores, promising she'd take care of everything. The rain soaked through her jacket as she stood there, refusing to leave without me. Finally, her father sighed heavily. "Fine. But just temporarily. If he doesn't work out in a week, he goes back." My heart should have soared, but I heard the word temporarily and understood I wasn't really wanted. I was just a favor to stop a little girl's tears. The car ride to their house was silent except for the windshield wipers. I sat in a cardboard box on Ella's lap, peeking over the edge to see my new family. Her mother kept glancing back with a frown. One week, she reminded everyone. If he chews furniture or makes a mess, he's gone. I curled up smaller, trying not to take up too much space. Their house was enormous, the kind with tall white columns and a circular driveway. Through the windows, I could see crystal chandeliers and shiny marble floors. This wasn't a home for a scruffy little puppy like me. This was a palace. As Ella carried me inside, her father muttered, "Just keep him out of the way." I knew right then I'd have to be invisible, quiet, perfect. One mistake and I'd lose the only person who wanted me. That night, I slept on a towel in the corner of Ella's room, listening to her breathe, promising myself I'd prove I belonged here. My first week was a test of survival. I learned quickly where I was allowed and where I wasn't. The kitchen was off limits unless I was invisible. The living room was for humans only. Even the backyard seemed too nice for a puppy like me. I survived on leftover scraps Ella would sneak to me when her parents weren't looking, bits of chicken, half a sandwich, crusts of toast. "I'm sorry, buddy," she'd whisper, using the name she'd given me. "They'll see how good you are soon." But they didn't. Her mother complained about my paw prints on the porch. Her father grumbled when I accidentally knocked over a potted plant. Every night, I'd curl up next to Ella's bed, not on it, I knew better, and I'd watch her sleep. She was the only warmth in this cold, enormous house. And I promised myself that no matter what, I'd protect her. Even if nobody thought I could. One morning, I smelled something wrong. It was a sharp, bitter smell coming from the basement, something that made my nose wrinkle and my instincts scream danger. I barked once, then twice, running to the basement door and scratching at it urgently. Ella's father appeared in his bathrobe, annoyed. What's all the noise? I barked again, louder this time, pawing at the door. Buddy, stop, he snapped. It's 6 in the morning. But the smell was getting stronger. I whimpered and barked again, trying to make them understand. Her mother came downstairs, tying her robe. That dog is going to drive me crazy. Can't we just take him back today? Ella rushed down in her pajamas. Dad, maybe something's wrong. He finally opened the basement door. The gas smell hit him immediately. His face went pale. Gas leak, he breathed, running to shut off the valve. Later, after the repairman left, nobody mentioned that I'd tried to warn them. Nobody thanked me. It was like it never happened. That night, I heard crying. Not loud crying, the quiet kind that people try to hide. I followed the sound to Ella's room and found her curled up on her bed, her face buried in her pillow. Through the walls, I could hear her parents fighting downstairs. Words like debt and bankruptcy and sell the house floated up the stairs. Ella was shaking. I did the only thing I knew how to do. I jumped up on her bed, breaking my own rule, and crawled close to her. She wrapped her arms around me, and I felt her tears soak into my fur. I'm scared, buddy, she whispered. What if we lose everything? What if they make me give you back? I licked her cheek and pressed myself against her chest, feeling her heartbeat slow down as she held me. In that moment, I understood my purpose. I wasn't here to be big or impressive or to guard the house. I was here to guard her heart. And I would do that job better than any dog in the world, no matter how small I was. The next afternoon, the neighbor came by. Mr. Henderson was a large man with a booming voice who always seemed to have an opinion about everything. He saw me in the front yard and laughed, a loud, mocking laugh that made my ears flatten. That's your guard dog, he called to Ella's father. That little thing couldn't guard a sandwich. Ella's father looked embarrassed. He's just temporary. My daughter wanted a pet. Mr. Henderson crouched down, and I backed away nervously. Look at him. Scared of his own shadow. You need a real dog, a German Shepherd, a Rottweiler. Something with teeth. He stood up, still chuckling. That toy couldn't protect anyone from anything. After he left, Ella's father looked at me with disappointment. He's right. What were we thinking? I sat there in the grass, my tail tucked, feeling smaller than I'd ever felt. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was useless. But that night, lying next to Ella, I made a silent vow. I'd show them. Somehow, someday, I'd prove I was more than they thought. I spent my days exploring every inch of the yard, learning the property like the back of my paw. That's when I found it, buried under the old oak tree, partially covered by dirt and leaves. A shiny silver key. I didn't know what it opened, but something told me it was important. I dug carefully with my small paws until I could grab it in my mouth. It tasted like metal and earth. I carried it to the back porch and hid it under a flower pot, somewhere safe. Ella found me digging later and giggled. What are you looking for, buddy? Buried treasure? Her mother appeared at the door. That dog is tearing up the garden. I told you this wouldn't work. But I'd already reburied the spot, and the key was safe. I didn't know why I felt the need to hide it, but my instincts told me that one day, that key would matter. One day, I'd need it to protect the people who didn't even know they needed protecting. I noticed things that humans missed. Like how the security camera near the garage door had a blinking red light that suddenly went dark. Like how the back gate was left unlocked 3 nights in a row. Like how a man in a uniform came to check the meters, but spent too long looking at the windows. Nobody else paid attention, but I watched everything. My small size meant I could slip under bushes and hide in corners, observing without being noticed. One evening, I saw the same uniformed man standing across the street, talking on his phone and pointing at the house. My fur stood on end. Something was wrong. I tried to tell them by barking at the window, but Ella's mother just shooed me away. "Buddy, stop barking at nothing." But it wasn't nothing. I could feel danger circling closer, like a storm gathering on the horizon. I just didn't know how to make them understand that the thing they needed protection from wasn't a stranger at the door, it was already inside their world, waiting. The next morning, I saved Ella by accident. She was reaching for her favorite cereal on the top shelf when a heavy glass vase her mother had placed there began to wobble. I saw it before anyone else did, watched it teeter on the edge, about to fall right where Ella stood. Without thinking, I ran forward and jumped against her legs, pushing her sideways. She stumbled, confused. "Buddy, what?" The vase crashed exactly where she'd been standing, exploding into 1,000 glittering pieces. For a moment, everyone just stared. Then her father scooped her up, checking for cuts. "She's okay," he breathed. Ella looked at me with wide eyes. "Buddy saved me." He pushed me out of the way. Her mother swept up the glass, shaking. That was lucky timing. But Ella knew better. She picked me up and hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. "You're a hero, buddy." I licked her cheek, my tail wagging for the first time in days. Maybe I wasn't useless after all. Late at night, I heard them again, soft sounds that didn't belong. Footsteps in the driveway. A car door closing carefully, trying not to make noise. I jumped off Ella's bed and ran to the window, my paws barely making a sound on the hardwood floor. Through the curtains, I saw shadows moving near the garage. My instincts screamed. I barked, loud, urgent, persistent. Ella stirred. "Buddy? What's wrong?" Her father appeared in the hallway, angry and exhausted. "That dog needs to learn some manners. It's 2 in the morning." I kept barking, running to the stairs, then back to the window. But he just closed Ella's door. "Go to sleep, both of you." I whimpered, pressing my nose against the window. The shadows had disappeared, but I knew they'd been there. I stayed awake all night, watching, waiting, my small body tense with worry. Nobody believed me. Nobody ever believed me. But I wouldn't stop watching. I couldn't. Because somewhere deep in my bones, I knew the danger was getting closer, and I was the only one who could see it coming. The next night, the power went out. The whole house went dark, and I heard Ella gasp in her room. She was afraid of the dark, I knew that from the small night light she always kept on. I heard her fumbling around, calling for her parents. But they were downstairs arguing again, their voices sharp and angry. Ella's window was stuck, and she couldn't get it open to call for help. I scratched at it with my paws, small as they were, pushing and nudging until finally, miraculously, it budged. Fresh air rushed in, and moonlight filled her room. "Buddy." She hugged me close. "How did you know?" I didn't know how to tell her that I always knew when she needed me. That I could feel her fear like it was my own. When the power came back on an hour later, her parents found us curled up together by the window. Her father paused in the doorway, watching us. For a moment, I thought I saw something soften in his face. But then he just said, "Time for bed, Ella," and walked away. Still, that night felt different. Like maybe, just maybe, he was starting to see me as more than temporary. Panic filled the house the next morning. Ella's father was tearing through his office, throwing papers everywhere, his face red with stress. The contract. Where's the contract file? Her mother rushed in. What happened? He ran his hands through his hair. The Henderson deal, the documents are gone. Everything. Property deeds, signed agreements, all of it. If we don't produce those papers by Friday, we lose everything. The house, the business, everything. I watched from the doorway as he collapsed into his chair, head in his hands. I kept them in the safe. They can't just disappear. But they had disappeared. And I noticed something nobody else did. The safe door was slightly open, and there were muddy footprints on the carpet. Small details. Important details. The kind of details a little dog like me noticed because I lived in the small spaces nobody else paid attention to. I slipped out of the room quietly, my mind already working. I had to help them. I had to find those papers. I searched everywhere humans didn't think to look. Under furniture. Behind curtains. In the dusty corners where cobwebs grew. That's when I found it, behind the living room couch, wedged between the wall and the wood frame. A small black USB drive. It had fallen there, probably knocked off the coffee table during one of their arguments. I grabbed it gently in my mouth and carried it upstairs to Ella's room. She was doing homework, chewing on her pencil. I dropped the drive in her lap. She looked confused. "What's this, buddy? Where did you find this?" I barked once and wagged my tail. She turned it over in her hands, then her eyes widened. There was a label on it in her father's handwriting, Henderson Backup. She ran downstairs, calling, "Dad! Dad!" I followed, my heart pounding. Her father took the drive with shaking hands, plugged it into his computer, and stared at the screen. Everything was there. Every document, every contract, every signature. He looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time since I'd arrived. "The dog found this?" Ella nodded proudly. "Buddy found it." He reached down and scratched behind my ear, and I felt my tail wag so hard my whole body shook. "Good boy," he whispered. "Good boy." But my discovery raised a new question. If the USB was behind the couch, where were the original papers? And who had taken them? That night, I found a clue. While the family slept, I crept downstairs and sniffed around the office. That's when I smelled it, a scent I recognized. Cologne. The same cologne the uniformed man wore when he'd come to check the meters. I followed the scent to the garage and found something tucked behind the garbage bins, a glove. Black leather, still smelling strongly of that same cologne. I grabbed it in my mouth and dragged it inside, leaving it by the front door where Ella's father would find it in the morning. Sure enough, when he discovered it at dawn, his face went pale. "This isn't ours," he muttered. He picked it up carefully, examining it. Then he did something I didn't expect. He called the police. 2 officers came that afternoon, and I watched from under the coffee table as he explained everything. The missing documents. The unlocked gates. The strange man. They took the glove, promising to investigate. And suddenly, the pieces were falling into place. Weeks passed, and I almost forgot it was happening. Ella's birthday. She'd mentioned it once to her parents at dinner, but they'd been too distracted with their money problems to hear her. The morning arrived, and she came downstairs hoping for balloons or a cake. But there was nothing. Her parents were already arguing about bills in the kitchen. She sat at the table alone, tears threatening to fall. I couldn't let her spend her birthday sad. While she ate her cereal, I slipped outside to the garden. I remembered seeing flowers growing near the back fence, small yellow ones that smelled sweet. I bit the stem of one carefully and carried it in my mouth, trotting back inside. I dropped it on the table next to her bowl. She looked down, surprised, then started crying, but this time, happy tears. Buddy brought me a birthday flower, she whispered, picking me up and hugging me close. Her mother turned from the kitchen, suddenly remembering. Oh no. Sweetheart, I'm so sorry. We forgot, but Ella just smiled through her tears. It's okay. Buddy remembered. Her mother felt terrible. That afternoon, she baked Ella's favorite muffins, chocolate chip with extra sugar. She left them cooling on the counter while she answered the phone. I watched from my spot under the table, and I noticed something. Her mother looked exhausted. Defeated. Like the weight of the world was on her shoulders. When she hung up the phone, she leaned against the counter and wiped her eyes. Without thinking, I jumped up, something I never did, and grabbed one of the muffins in my mouth. Her mother spun around. Buddy. No. I dropped to the floor and ran, but instead of eating the muffin, I carried it to where she stood and dropped it by her feet. Then I carefully tore it in half with my teeth and pushed one piece toward her. She stared at me, confused. Then, slowly, she started laughing. Really laughing, for the first time since I'd arrived. Are you sharing with me? She picked up the half and took a bite, then slid down to sit on the floor next to me. You're a strange little dog, you know that? I wagged my tail and ate my half. She scratched my head gently. Maybe you're not so useless after all. After that day, something changed. I felt it in the way the house breathed. I started staying up all night by the front door, just watching. Listening. I couldn't explain it to anyone, but my instincts told me that danger was close. Very close. Ella's father noticed me there one morning when he came down for coffee. You've been sleeping here? He asked, looking at the little nest I'd made out of an old blanket. I looked up at him, and he knelt down, studying my face. You really are trying to protect us, aren't you? I licked his hand. He smiled sadly. I'm sorry I didn't see it before. I'm sorry I called you useless. He sat down on the floor next to me, his back against the door. The truth is, I was scared. Scared of losing everything. And I took it out on you. We sat there together in the early morning light, and for the first time, I felt like maybe I was becoming part of this family for real. Not temporarily. Not conditionally. Just, family. It happened on a Thursday night. I woke suddenly from a deep sleep, my ears perked. There, a soft clicking sound. The basement door. I jumped up from my spot by Ella's bed and ran to the hallway. My heart pounded as I crept down the stairs, staying low and quiet. The basement door was cracked open, and I could hear voices below. Two men, speaking in hushed whispers. The safe's down here. Boss said the backup documents are worthless, we need the originals. My fur stood on end. These were the people who'd been watching. The ones who'd taken the papers. I wanted to bark, to alert everyone, but something told me to wait. To be smart. I slipped through the crack in the door and down the basement stairs, staying in the shadows. And that's when I remembered, the key. The silver key I'd buried weeks ago. I turned and ran as fast as my small legs could carry me, back up the stairs, out the back door, to the flower pot where I'd hidden it. I grabbed it in my mouth and raced back to the basement. The men were loading papers into a bag, their backs turned to me. I saw my chance. The basement had an old storage room with a heavy metal door. I'd explored it once when I first arrived. The door was open, and if I could just... I ran forward and barked as loud as I could. The men spun around. What the, a dog? One of them lunged for me, but I was faster. I darted into the storage room, and they followed, angry and frustrated. The moment they were both inside, I squeezed back out through their legs and ran to the door. Using every ounce of strength in my small body, I pushed it. It swung slowly, so slowly. Hey! Stop that mutt! But I kept pushing, and finally, mercifully, it clicked shut. The lock. I dropped the key into the slot and heard it turn. They were trapped. I'd done it. I barked and barked, running upstairs to wake the family. Lights turned on. Ella's father appeared. Buddy? What's wrong? I ran back to the basement, barking frantically. He followed me down, and when he heard the men pounding on the storage room door, his eyes went wide. Call the police, he shouted upstairs. Now! The police arrived within minutes. When they opened the storage room door, they found 2 men and a bag full of stolen documents, including the original Henderson contracts. But there was more. One of the men was wearing the company uniform of her father's business partner. The same man who'd been checking meters. The same man whose cologne I'd smelled. The detective questioned them, and the truth came out like a flood. Ella's father's business partner had been trying to steal the property deals for himself, planning to frame her father for fraud and take over the company. They'd been working together for months, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. If you hadn't caught them tonight, the detective said, they would have disappeared with evidence that could have sent you to prison. Ella's father looked down at me, his eyes shining with tears. A puppy stopped them. A little puppy I almost gave away. He picked me up, holding me close. You saved everything, buddy. Everything. By morning, we were famous. Someone had called the news, and reporters lined up outside the house. Local puppy outsmarts thieves, the headlines read. Smallest hero saves family from ruin. Cameras flashed as Ella held me on the front porch, and I tried to hide my face in her shoulder. I didn't like the attention. I'd only done what felt right. But the story spread fast, on TV, on the internet, everywhere. Strangers sent letters and toys. Mr. Henderson came by to apologize, his face red with embarrassment. I was wrong about you, little guy, he said quietly. Dead wrong. Ella's father appeared in every interview, telling the story over and over. He was the dog we almost didn't keep. The dog I called useless. And he saved our family, our home, our entire lives. That night, after all the cameras left, Ella's mother made me a special dinner, real chicken, not scraps. And for the first time since I'd arrived, I ate in the dining room with the family. Like I belonged. 2 days later, Ella's father called me into his office. I walked in nervously, not sure what to expect. He was sitting at his desk, and when he saw me, he smiled, a real, warm smile. "Come here, buddy." I trotted over, and he reached down, lifting me onto his lap. "I need to tell you something," he said softly. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry for every time I called you useless. For every time I made you feel small. For almost giving you away." His voice cracked. "You're the bravest soul I've ever met. And I'm ashamed it took almost losing everything to see it." He hugged me close, and I felt his tears drop onto my fur. "You're not temporary anymore. You're family. Forever." I licked his cheek, my tail wagging so hard it hurt. Ella appeared in the doorway, and her mother stood behind her, both of them crying happy tears. They joined us, and we sat there together in a big family hug. And in that moment, I knew I'd finally found what I'd been searching for since the day I was born. I'd found home. The following week, something amazing happened. The mayor invited us to City Hall for a special ceremony. Ella wore her best dress, and her parents dressed up too. But I just wore my collar, the same worn leather one I'd had since the shelter. Until we got there. The mayor, a kind woman with silver hair, knelt down in front of me. "Buddy," she said, "on behalf of this city, we want to honor your bravery and loyalty." She pulled out a small blue box and opened it. Inside was the most beautiful collar I'd ever seen, shiny silver with a gold tag engraved with my name and one word, hero. She fastened it around my neck, and everyone applauded. But that wasn't all. She pinned a small medal to my collar, an honorary service medal given to dogs who'd protected their community. Cameras flashed. People cheered. And Ella held me up high, crying and laughing at the same time. "That's my buddy," she shouted. "That's my hero." I'd started my life as the smallest, quietest puppy nobody wanted. And now I wore a medal that said I mattered. That I'd made a difference. That love and loyalty were worth more than size or strength. Months passed, and life settled into a new rhythm. Every morning, I'd wake up in Ella's bed, not next to it, but on it, right beside her. Her father would greet me with breakfast and a scratch behind the ears. Her mother would sneak me treats when she thought no one was looking. We were a real family now. One evening, as the sun set over our house, the house I'd helped save, we all sat together on the front porch. Ella's father had rebuilt his business, stronger than before. The property deals went through. The house was safe. All because of a series of small moments, a buried key, a USB drive behind a couch, a silver collar, and a puppy who refused to give up. I stood at the edge of the porch, looking out at the yard I'd explored so many times. My tail wagged slowly, contentedly. Behind me, I heard Ella whisper to her parents, "I knew he was special from the first moment I saw him." Her father wrapped his arm around her. "You were right. You saw what the rest of us missed." And as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky orange and pink, I barked once, a happy, triumphant bark that echoed across the neighborhood. I was Buddy. The smallest dog with the biggest heart. The puppy they'd called useless. The hero who'd saved everything. And this porch, this family, this love, this was my home. Forever.